and also look at, um, as we're talking about ascension and, look at what is serving on on a larger scale, you know, not just in an individual family unit, but is this working in the society? Or is this causing an awfully lot of pain and abuse that is not necessary? And does it need to be reseen?
Mm.
Now, I understand that each of us feels like, oh, I can't make a difference in the society. Guess what? You can. If you and a whole bunch of others get together, that's how things change. And
Yeah.
that's how things have always changed.
Yeah.
It isn't by, quote, voting for somebody, or it isn't by holding up the old structure. It's about grassroots. Let's change this and from the bottom up and come up with something that is workable, something that is, how does I can't remember his name now. You can't change anything by using the old system and trying to make it work. You have
Mm.
to come up with something that is going to make that the old system outdated and bring that in and replace it. That's
Yeah.
the only way change works.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's something else that's on top of this, is to see if it's not working, see if you can be part of the change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Beautifully said. And, you know, yes, we work best when we're together and, when there's many voices and things change. And one voice can make a difference, like you said before. I spoke to a committee, if you will, at City Hall yesterday because there were some things that I noticed within one of the sectors, if you will, that wasn't fitting for a lot of people, and yet no one knew where to ask the questions and who to go to. So I went. And maybe it's where I'm at in life. Maybe it's, because I knew some people on the committee and whatever it was, but I was able to share my thoughts about how they're viewing what they're doing as good, which it is, and yet it's not as inclusive and as it was going against the grain of not about me without me. So they were doing things without the families at the table. And I said, you can't do that. If it's about us, you have to have us there. And a Coast Salish elder told me that years ago, not about me without me. And when I talk about inclusion, it means, inclusive thought of everything. And yet we don't have to look just forward with that thought. If we're using tools and things from the past, let's use that lens of inclusion to look and sift through the past stuff so that we're not just carrying on the old, as you're talking about, but we're sifting that old stuff and going, okay, well, that's not inclusive, or that has nothing, you know, pertinent, but there are elements in there that we can take out and then utilize to so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel and we don't have to lose all of our progress and we can bring it into the light as to where we want to go. So it was powerful. I ruffled some feathers, and other feathers were appreciative. So um, it's not always easy, not always going to be the reaction you want. And yet, when you stay in yourself, in your true sense of who you are, whether it has to just be in the background for a little while longer, but there will be a time. There will be safety. Yeah, and love.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
And that works not just on a human scale, but on a larger macro scale. Um, this is what you're talking about, is a very small version of how to change timelines. in this case, in a group,
Right.
which we can do that individually, we can do it in a group, we can do it collectively as a whole, or something even larger. But and I know we've talked about changing timelines before, but I'm going to tell of an event that really brings to the forefront what changing timelines is all about. About 2 weeks before I left for Germany, I started getting these messages, and they were more like picture messages than they were word messages. And it was of a plane, and of the plane, I'm just going to shorten it to the plane ending up in the water with all the people on it.
Oh my
Okay.
goodness.
Um, and these messages kept coming through and coming through, and I'm like, what is going on here? Why am I getting this? What is this? And so I started the process of jumping a timeline. I'm like, if this is what is supposed to happen, and I don't want to be on that, I'm going to start changing this timeline. So the way you change a timeline is you see what you want to have happen, not what you are seeing happen, not what your trajectory seems to be pointing at happening, whatever that might be, but
Mm,
what you want to happen. In this case, I wanted to see me safely at the airport in Vancouver. And at first I just was like, okay, do I do this individually and astral travel and I don't exist anymore like I was, and you know, all of this kind of stuff. And then I got to wait a minute. Um, Maybe what we really need to do is see the entire plane safely on the ground in Vancouver, with all of the people safely on the ground in Vancouver. So I started working on this one, and I started really seeing it. I mean, I've never been to Vancouver before, had no idea what it looked like, but I put the pictures in my mind of what I thought it would look like. And you don't, in order to jump a timeline, you don't have to have the exact details.
mhm.
What you do have to have is a good picture.
Yeah.
And so I kept seeing this, okay, in the airport, safe, everything is good, everyone is fine. And then 2 days before I left, I something happened. And I'm like, something's happened here. And as I got up in the morning and started doing my day and such, my husband came in and he said, did you hear about this? And there was a flight from London to Singapore that had experienced extreme turbulence, and lots of people got hurt, and some of them got hurt critically. Um, and apparently, that same turbulence is what was supposed to get our plane. And I was like, as soon as I knew this, I'm like, that's the freedom. I've jumped the timeline. It's wonderful. I've jumped the timeline. We're going to be safe. And I did immediately start seeing all of the people that were on that flight in their highest, most vibrant health, and just highest joy, and just giving them all the support I possibly could, because I wouldn't want to be on that timeline like they were. And I know they didn't want to be on that timeline. But for whatever reason, someone had to be on that timeline. Now, there's all sorts of rabbit holes that could be gone down here. We're not going to go there right now. Suffice it to say, and I think I was not alone. I think there were probably several of us on my flight who had been given the opportunity to jump this timeline and did, and brought the entire plane without incident calmly into Vancouver Airport. This is jumping a timeline on a much larger scale. By the way, that morning when I knew that we had jumped the timeline, after I got around to, because I don't, I'm not the kind of person that goes in and looks at myself and blah, 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 blah. When I did finally get into the look in the mirror, my hair was completely gray. Every hair on my head was completely gray, and the skin on my face was cracked and just chapped, and I could feel it. I mean, it was like I'd been in the sun for way too long, and it had blistered, and everything was broken open.
Ooh.
This is what would have happened if I had been on that plane. And I know that to be true now. But I immediately started, okay, I know what this is. This is the evidence of having jumped the timeline. So I started doing what I do, and I know how to do these things. It took me the whole 2 weeks I was gone to get everything completely back to normal. But you see my hair now. It's not gray. and,
Yeah.
and it's all okay now. And we made it through I mean, everything went smoothly. All of the flights were smooth the entire time. And all the time, I continued to send the support to all those people. Some of them I think are probably still in the hospital over in Bangkok. Um,
Mm.
but continued to send all the support I could to all these people who had had to go through that so that we could have the easy flight that we wanted to. And that's when you're jumping your timelines, this could be something to think about. Another big incident of a timeline jump, and yours don't have to be this big, is Nelson Mandela, who was in prison. And lots of people knew that in the 1980s he died in prison, except that he didn't. He jumped that timeline, and he came out of prison and became the president of South Africa, and he abolished apartheid in that country. That's a pretty big timeline to jump. And
Mm.
there were I'm sure that there were people who were very much not pleased with the way that he jumped his timeline. The people who had been quote benefiting from apartheid probably did not like him very much. This can happen on a large scale jump, but most of us jump timelines smally. For instance, you're going along in your life and you get the opportunity to make a choice. Do I have a child? Do I not have a child? Either way, this is going to have an effect on your life, and it's going to change the trajectory of your life. Either way, this is a timeline jump. If you choose to have that child, your life changes dramatically. If you choose not to, your life probably still changes dramatically, but in a different way.
Mhm.
This is timeline jumping. We do it all the time. And how do we do that? We see what we want. If you're a couple and you've been trying for a long time to have a baby, or if you're a single and you're getting to that point in your life where you're like, maybe I should really think about this now because I don't have that much life time left. And you see yourself with this child, okay? And you see it and you see it and you see it. The first part is see it, let it go. But again, continue to see it as already happened, already happened, already happened. Okay. And then you get to the point where now you or both of you, one of you, whatever, is pregnant. Now you're having this child. Life is changing. Let me tell you, life is changing. And then you have the child and your entire world. It's all about the child. It's no longer about you. And your life has changed and you have jumped that timeline. And
Mm.
this is the way you do it to jump a timeline in whatever form or fashion it is. A timeline jump is just you choosing a different trajectory for your life.
Mm.
In my case, in this one, and it was a big one, I mean, huge, but we chose to be on a safe flight instead of being on one that wasn't.
Mhm.
I do wish that the other people hadn't had to go through that. That's not something I can do anything about at this point,
Mm.
except send them support.
Mhm.
So understand, even with the possible timeline of having a baby, there are going to be repercussions. There's going to be things that happen. There might be people who are not happy about it. Your family might say, you're too old, you're whatever, you know, you still jump the timeline.
Mhm.
It's your choice, not theirs. And if there are repercussions that people don't like, maybe they had something to learn from it. Maybe they had maybe for whatever reason, that was to be part of their experience. You don't know. And so you choose your timelines and you choose to go through with it and have whatever consequences may come. And consequences can be very uplifting, they can be not so pleasant. Um, but you will have, if you have a baby, you're going to love that baby.
Mhm.
That's a wonderful consequence.
Mhm.
You know, it doesn't have to be, the word consequences doesn't have to be negative.
Yep.
Everything we do has consequences. And we are jumping timelines constantly, every time we make a decision, every
Mm.
time. Some of them are very small, some of them are much larger.
Yep.
And that's what we need to understand about timelines and how to
Mm.
jump them.
Cool. Thank you. Important stuff these days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people have this idea that jumping timelines, I don't know how to do that. Well, you've been doing it all your life. And they're like, I have. And you point it out to them and they're like, that's timeline jumping? Yeah, that is.
Yeah. Wow. Cool. Thank you for all those insights and the story about your experience. And I was very glad when we were able to meet in Vancouver
Me
safely.
too.
You were on
Me
the
too.
ground.
And I'm
Yeah.
sure I seemed really a little tired, which I was at that point in time. But you probably also felt that there was this difference. Um,
Yeah.
when I left, uh, when I left here in Hawaii, the person that I was when I left here is not the person who came back. And that new person, which is not really new, but is still developing and continues to develop
Mhm.
in all sorts of ways. I am more confident now. I'm more self assured. I don't put up with a whole lot of people's crap. Let's just put it out there. Um, but also,